Okay, I just thought I'd try something different here. In the podcasting world, I feel like there's not a lot of transparency involved all the time with productions and what kind of numbers people get, what kind of downloads, what to expect, which can vary widely between shows when you're starting out, and how long it takes to develop kind of a good following. So this is a kind of a mashup I put together at the end of 2022, looking back at all the years of statistics I've gathered for our show, The Storage Papers. If you don't know me, I'm Jeremy Enfinger. I'm the narrator, writer, creator for that show. I do have help with the show now, and didn't start out that way. So I thought I would just put this together as a way to share information. So let's just kind of go through this here. Topics I want to discuss include the history of the storage papers from start to end. We'll look at all-time downloads. I did start on Anchor and then moved over to Acast when I signed on with Rusty Quill Network. I'll talk a little bit about that. 2022 podcast statistics that I took from several sources across the internet. I want to compare those to my own show, including ranking percentage, number of downloads for the first 7 days for any episode. And I want to kind of talk about listener platforms and demographics as, I get some of those statistics through the Rusty Quill server. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with those just yet. I know there's a lot to be done with marketing and things like that, but I at least want to share them, maybe brainstorm some ideas. I'm going to talk about income streams. Financial earnings. There are specifics I can't mention because of contracts I've signed, but I will get as specific as I can without breaching any sort of contract that I'm involved in. All right, so let's just kind of take a look at big picture stuff here. I started the storage papers in July 2019, and basically, I was on Anchor, which is a free hosting platform now owned by Spotify. Was not owned by Spotify when I started, but I did that through May of 2021, and I'll kind of go through a little timeline here. Yeah, I started at the very beginning of my show, and you can see download numbers were very little. I will say I had a little bit of an audience from a previous podcast I did. Not much though. That was an interview-based podcast, and I did a little advertising on that. Found really quickly that they were not into fiction. That was a paranormal-based show that was interview, and they didn't really vibe with this new content. But I was doing this as more of a creative venture at the time, and I kind of didn't care. But you'll see as the numbers go here. I think I had 11 episodes in my first season. And you can kind of see a little bit of growth here. And then at one point, I finished that season, and I had promised the audience, I set a specific date of like season 2 is going to come out this date. It's going to be quite a number more episodes. And I ended up getting sick. I communicated to my audience. I said, look, I'm not going to get this stuff out on time. But I'm going to do a little experiment here. If you can wait, just hold out just a little bit longer. I've got some other authors here that are helping me, and I've got several stories. I think I had 17 or so at the time. And I told them that I was going to release all of season 2 the same day. So that's why you see this spike here. August 24th of 2020, I released all of those the same day. And it's kind of a cool experiment because if you look, obviously everybody's going to binge it all the first week or so. And then I really think, looking at all these spikes, if I had done one episode at a time, if you're looking at this trend, I might have been somewhere around here as long as I retained my audience and was able to share my show consistently during my hiatus. I don't think I would have ever gotten even the second spike here. But that's where it kind of changed for me. This was a total of 7,529 plays on that particular launch day, which I did do some social media stuff leading up to, and I had some other authors helping me do that. But I think that was kind of a good move for me. That put me up on the charts. And, a lot of podcasters will say, get on Apple's new and noteworthy list when you first launch. That's such an impossible task. If I had done this when I launched, maybe. But you got to understand, this is months and months and months of writing, revisions, working with other authors, and then all the recording and editing. Everything was done for release at one time. So maybe there's value in doing that at the beginning launch of a show. I don't know. That might be something I test out next time. But at least for the storage papers, that's how it went. And we kind of just focused on writing season 3 during this whole time frame after, when was it? August of 2020. And you'll see that things just kind of dwindled down to nothing here. And there's a good reason for this. There's a specific mark there where I actually switched over to a different network, or to a network. I was not on a network in the beginning, but I switched over to a different podcast host. And I'll talk about that in a little bit here. As of May 2021 to present, which when I created this slide, it was, I think it was December 29th. Yep, it's right here. I had accumulated 1,779,000 downloads. That's a lot. So that's just from the time I went from Anchor to present day. Now, granted, that's a long time, but as I go through the slides here, I'll break it down a little bit more soon. I combined my 224,000 from Anchor with the 1.7 million. I just broke 2 million downloads, right before the new year, which, I mean, that's huge. I'm kind of flabbergasted, I think, to see that that's possible, given that I've never done fiction before. And I don't know. I'm just blown away. So I'm kind of a data person. So I wanted to run these numbers and just kind of get some information to put out there. Hopefully it's valuable to you. And I'm sure that there's people with more experience with podcasting and marketing that could probably expand upon why this has been a successful show. At least I think it's successful. If you notice, I only ran this up to May. That's when I switched over to Rusty Quill's platform on Acast. What our deal was is, I still independently produced the show. I did not take any money from Rusty Quill. I didn't negotiate any rights or anything. The only thing we have set up is a licensing deal, basically. I put my content on their network and we share an ad revenue split. So that said, I was kind of waiting. We had talked way back in like October of 2020 was when they initially approached me about this. And we went with the first tier that went live in March or May. I can't remember, March or May 2021. And I had to keep it hush hush until they were ready to make that announcement. So I couldn't tell anybody. I only told one person, and that was Nathan, who also writes the show with me now, and Cody at the time as well. But they were also under non-disclosure agreements with me. So I felt comfortable doing that, and I got the okay from Rusty Quill. Anyway, we launched our Patreon and season 3 at the same time, right around this March 2021, and things just skyrocketed from there. The traffic that Rusty Quill brought was huge, and I think we gained a bit more of a following after releasing that entire season all at once. But our deal with Rusty Quill was 20 episode seasons. They wanted a weekly show if possible, but I didn't know if I could commit to it. So we put out an episode every 2 weeks. So yeah, it just kind of climbed from there and kept going. So over 2 million views. I pulled some statistics from various reports. And I've got the link at the bottom here if you want to look at this yourself. There's a lot more information within that I did not include in this presentation. It might be worth looking at. So Buzzsprout did their study where they said the top 1% of podcasts got an average of 3994 plus downloads in the first 7 days of release, right? So top 1%, 3,994. you're in the top 5% of podcasts if you get more than 795 downloads in the first 7 days after you put an episode out. A few years back when I was looking into starting this fiction podcast, I read a statistic at that time, back in like 2018 maybe, excuse me, that I think the average number of episodes a podcast lasted was 7 before it just disappeared. And either people stopped paying for hosting or it just sat there and wasn't marketed, wasn't added to. Nothing was consistent, you know. Maybe that's because there's such a low barrier to having a podcast and getting content out there. I don't know. But I found these statistics really, really interesting. If you look at the storage papers comparatively, what was that number? It was 3994. Season 4, episode 11 was the last one that came out before I pulled these statistics. First 7 days, got 5,900. So we're doing pretty good. We're 2,000 over that benchmark for that's a regular season episode. We had, it was funny because December, we always do extra bonus episodes. We like Christmas and Halloween, and we tend to write additional content around those holidays. But even those are beating that benchmark. For some reason, they don't get as many listens in the first 7 days, but I always chalk it up to holidays. People are visiting with family and work schedules are unusual and things like that. But either way, I'm very pleased with that. I mean, I can't ask for much more, right? Some of the statistics, let's see, overview of the top podcast streaming apps in 2022. Again, this is from this survey. Apple Podcasts, 37.4%. Spotify, not too far off at 26.8%. And this has changed over the last few years. I think when I started this show, Spotify might have been like 13 or 14%. Apple was over 50%. So that is something that's there, you know, Spotify's closing that gap every year. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. If you look at my own show statistics, January, this is all last year, January 1st, 2022 through December 29th, 2022, you can see Apple Podcasts was 39% for me. Spotify was 33%. So Apple's the blue here. Starts off pretty even, you know, there's a consistent symmetry there. But then all of a sudden in July of last year, Spotify spikes over. We had more downloads with Spotify than we did with Apple Podcasts, and then it dipped back down. I'm wondering, you know, to me, in my mind, I'm questioning, like, what happened to the algorithms? Did something at Apple change? Did something at Spotify change? I'm wondering if my show was the only one that experienced that. But it's something interesting as a data nerd that I like to keep an eye on. Looking at statistics for where listeners are all time, meaning from the very start of the podcast until December 2022. Majority of my audience is United States, with the UK, almost 8% there. Looking similar just in the month of December. You know, these numbers haven't really changed too much. All-time statistics, peak position for this show in the US. We've been in the top 100 in several categories, but fiction, number 22 was the peak, drama, number 10. For Great Britain, number 10 in fiction and number 7 in drama. So, you know, having a top 100 show, if you're always in that ranking, I feel like the longer you can hang out there, the more discoverable your show is, because I do think people look at those rankings and look for more content within them. Listener demographics, again, just interesting stuff. This is listeners by age group. This is current information. I pulled this for December. Not a huge range here. 25 to 34 has a tiny bit. 35 to 44 has a majority. And then like nothing in the teen to mid-20s and nothing over 44. I'm 45 myself, so I was expecting to see at least one right here. But no go. By gender, mostly women, fewer men, and then a lot that identify as non-binary. Let's talk about finances a little bit. And I know this is, again, this is something that's a little I guess, shy on the details I'd like to be able to share with you. But again, agreements have me to where I'm prevented from sharing everything with you here. But these are our sources of income, our regular sources of income. Patreon right now is outweighing our income from Rusty Quill ads. And I put RQ in ad revenue. There's a wide range of different ad types and placements that we consider here. Some of them are, the Rusty Quill negotiates those. About all I do is approve, like, yes, I want a pre-roll, yes, I want a post-roll, and I can assign a mid-roll, and often I do. And Acast allows me to just pick placement of where that ad starts. So I look for a good point in the episode where it's kind of like a transition period or silence between a couple of different scenes and place that there. Merch sales, we don't do a lot off merch, but I think for a few fans out there, they really enjoy having those tangible goods. Book sales, I wrote the first 2 seasons, I wrote in prose and put it in the form of a book just as kind of a collectible. Didn't get a ton of return on investment for that. It took a lot of time and effort, and it's still available on Amazon, and I still get 1 or 2 sales a month here and there. But return on investment is low for books, at least for me. I know some people have had success with it, depending on the topics and the type of show you have. So what I did too was I kind of looked at my bookkeeping. I have expenses, profits. I did an evaluation. I did a lot of Excel work in Excel to kind of look at this and how we actually have it set up. Actual expenses, take-home earnings was about 43% of what we pulled in. And Nathan and I split that 50-50. He does a ton of work on like the website, and he does all the artwork. He writes. He's started recording more and doing specific shows on Patreon that are Storage Papers Universe related, but he's 100% producing those. I always, and this is some kind of number I'll probably change here, I am extremely conservative when I reserve for taxes. I don't like to pay at the end of the year. So I just pull out 29% of earnings, of gross earnings off the top, and save that for taxes. I also put away business savings, a standard 5% across all gross earnings. Plus, I live in California where there's a specific state franchise tax that's $800 a year flat fee, plus whatever other taxes you owe. It is one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive state to own an LLC. We do payouts quarterly to Nathan and myself, and every quarter I put $200 just right off the top of gross earnings into savings, in addition to that 5% and then our web hosting stuff. We had some expenses. I spent about 6% of earnings on software, and these are things that I'm not purchasing lightly. I'm waiting for sales to happen. I'm only selecting things that will really bump up the quality of the show. There is a cost to merchandise, shipping. We did have a tier. We do currently have a tier on Patreon where there is a small number of people in our higher tier that get merch shipped. We just made some recent changes to that. There's still physical products, but it's not the same as it was before. Equipment, this microphone I'm using right now, and then work for hire, any acting fees or anything like that was 1%. And I have changes to move this budget around this year, and I did a comparison here. So I'm going to try to bump up, anything in green here is my increase here. I'm going to try to bump up our earning percentage to at least half of what we're pulling in. And in order to do that, that means I have to make cuts elsewhere. So for taxes, I think I'm safe bringing this down to 22% for taxes. Business savings, what I did was I pulled out the Grinner Media website hosting from Squarespace, and I'm in the process of building one through WordPress that's a lot cheaper. So I'm saving some money on that. The franchise tax, unfortunately, that's not going to change until I move out of California. And I think the 5% of all gross earnings just for savings in case something comes up, I think is a good idea to keep that. software, I really don't need much more. I'm actually right now I'm paying for Adobe Creative Cloud, and I use it for a lot of different things, even outside of the podcast. But I am in the process of kind of familiarizing myself with Reaper on a free trial version right now. And if I do decide I like it and want to purchase it, it's a $60 one-time fee as opposed to $29 a month for Adobe Creative Cloud. And that's a discount I get for being a teacher too. Merch, I kept the same. I wasn't sure if I could cut that, but after some numbers we crunched in January, I think I can cut that. But I also, what I want to do is have a little extra room for work for hire. I'm adding 6% there because not only do I have this project going where I have characters that we're bringing into the story more so, but I have other projects I want to start creating. And I really think that, even though like budgets are tight and, going rates for like, if you look at SAG rates and things like that, they're expensive. I don't know if I can pay that, but I'm trying to gradually bump up the fees that I pay for actors. A lot of people will record things for free. I do a lot of swaps with other creators. I've been on a few other podcasts, and those creators also do bit parts for mine as well. So sometimes you can work out deals where if you don't have a big budget for that kind of thing, I just, give my services in return for theirs. That's pretty much it. I just wanted to get this information out there. I do want to be as transparent as possible, and I hope that other creators are doing this as well. If you have questions for me, I'll answer them in the comments. But I hope this has been informative. And all right, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later.